She won't even notice it's gone, my son said to someone on the phone. By the time she figures it out, the money will be in my account. And she'll just think she forgot. I was standing in the hallway just past the kitchen doorway, holding a glass of water I'd gotten up to fetch. It was nearly midnight. Marcus thought I was asleep. He always assumed I went to bed at 9, like some kind of wind-up toy that needed recharging. But I've never slept well since Harold passed. The house gets too quiet, and quiet has a way of keeping you awake when you've spent 40 years falling asleep to someone's breathing. I didn't move. Didn't cough. Didn't let the ice clink against the glass. I just listened. The realtor's coming Tuesday, he continued. I've already signed the listing agreement. Power of attorney covers it. She gave me that years ago when Dad was sick. It's still valid. My heart didn't race. It froze like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed everything still. He laughed at something the other person said. Trust me, she's not going to fight this. She doesn't even remember what day it is half the time. By Christmas, I'll have the house sold and she'll be in assisted living where she belongs. I stood there until his voice faded into the guest bedroom. Then I walked back to my room, set the water on my nightstand, and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. My house, the house Harold and I bought in 1971 for $32,000. The house where I raised my children, graded thousands of essays at the kitchen table, watched my daughter take her first steps in the living room. The house where Harold died holding my hand in the bedroom down the hall. My son was selling it out from under me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, because I was calculating. At 81, you learn that anger is a luxury. Panic wastes time. What serves you is patience and precision. The same things I taught my students for 38 years at Jefferson High. You don't react to the problem, you solve it. By morning, I had a plan. Marcus came down for coffee around 8, acting like nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek and asked if I'd slept well. I told him I had. He said he was heading out to run some errands and would be back by lunch. I smiled and nodded and waited until his car disappeared down Maple Street. Then I went to my filing cabinet. Harold always called it my fortress. For drawers of documents organized by year, by type, by importance. Tax returns going back to 1969. Medical records, insurance policies, and in the bottom drawer, in a fireproof folder, our property deed and every legal document we'd ever signed. I pulled out the power of attorney Marcus mentioned. He was right. I had signed one back in 2016 when Harold was in the hospital and we didn't know if he'd make it. I needed someone to handle things if I couldn't. Marcus had offered. He was so helpful then, so concerned. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have a son who stepped up. But I also remembered something else. The document was a limited power of attorney. It covered medical decisions and bill payments during Harold's hospitalization. It was not a general POA. It did not give Marcus authority over my property. And it had an expiration clause valid for 1 year from signing unless renewed in writing. It expired in March 2017. Marcus either didn't know that or he was counting on me not remembering. Fatal miscalculation. I made copies of everything. Then I called my daughter. Rebecca lived 3 hours away in Columbus. She was the quiet one, the one who called every Sunday, who sent flowers on my birthday, who never asked for anything. When I told her what I'd heard, she went silent for a long moment. "Mom," she finally said. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She exhaled. "That's fraud. That's actual fraud." "I know. What do you want to do?" I looked out the window at the maple tree in the front yard, the one Harold planted when Marcus was born. "I want to keep my house," I said. "And I want him to face what he's done." Rebecca arrived the next day. She took a personal day from work and drove straight through. We sat at the kitchen table with all the documents spread out between us, and she listened while I explained everything. "The realtor is coming tomorrow," I said. "If I confront Marcus now, he'll deny it. He'll say I misheard. He'll say I'm confused. So what's the plan?" "We let the realtor come." Rebecca stared at me. "Mom, think about it. If I stop it now, there's no proof of anything. Just my word against his. But if the realtor shows up and I'm standing there asking questions, everything unravels." She sat back in her chair. For a moment, I saw her as she was at 16. The girl who used to stay up late helping me grade papers because she said it made her feel useful. She had her father's eyes. Careful and kind. "You've really thought this through," she said. I've had 40 years of practice dealing with difficult students. Your brother isn't the first person who underestimated me. Tuesday came. I made coffee. I set out some cookies on a plate. The fancy butter ones I save for company. And at 10:15, a silver sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out carrying a clipboard and a folder of papers. She walked up the front steps with the confident stride of someone who had done this 100 times. I opened the door before she knocked. Mrs. Coleman, she smiled. Professional and bright. I'm Teresa Vance from Prestige Realty. I'm here for our walkthrough. Walkthrough, I repeated. Yes, for the listing. Your son Marcus arranged it. He said you were expecting me. I tilted my head. Did he? Her smile faltered just slightly. Is there a problem? Please, I said, stepping aside. Come in. I led her to the living room and offered her coffee. She accepted, still holding her clipboard like a shield. I could see the confusion settling into her face. The dawning realization that something wasn't adding up. Mrs. Vance, I said, sitting across from her. I need to ask you something. Who signed the listing agreement for this property? She blinked. Your son, Marcus Coleman. He has power of attorney. May I see the document he provided? She hesitated, then pulled a paper from her folder and handed it to me. I read it slowly, deliberately. It was the same limited POA from 2016, the one that expired 7 years ago. Someone had whited out the expiration date and photocopied it. This document is expired, I said calmly. And even when it was valid, it didn't authorize property transactions. Teresa's face went pale. I wasn't aware. He presented it as current. I'm sure he did, Mrs. Coleman. I am so sorry. You didn't know, I said. But now you do. And I'd like you to cancel the listing and provide me with copies of everything my son submitted to your office. She nodded quickly, already reaching for her phone. Of course, absolutely. I'll have everything sent over today. After she left, I sat alone in the living room for a long time. The coffee grew cold. The cookies sat untouched. Outside, the wind moved through the maple tree, and I watched the shadows dance across the carpet like they'd done every afternoon for 50 years. That evening, Marcus came home. He walked in with takeout bags from the Chinese place on 5th Street, the one Harold and I used to go to on Friday nights. Hey, Mom, he called. Brought dinner. I was sitting at the kitchen table. The documents were in front of me. He stopped when he saw them. What's all this? The realtor came today. His face flickered just for a second, then he recovered. Oh, right. I meant to tell you about that. I've been thinking, Mom, this house is a lot for you to handle alone. I found a really nice place over in Greenview, assisted living, beautiful facility. I thought if we sold the house, we could. He blinked. Stop. I kept my voice level. Not loud, not angry, just firm. The same voice I used on students who thought they could talk their way out of a failed exam. I heard you on the phone Saturday night. I know what you're planning, and I know you forged documents to do it. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, still holding the takeout bags. For a moment, he looked like he did at 12 years old, caught sneaking cookies before dinner. Then his expression hardened. Mom, you're confused. You probably heard something out of context, and the power of attorney expired in 2017. You altered the document and presented it to a realtor as current. That's forgery and fraud. That's ridiculous. Is it? I slid one of the papers toward him. This is the original. This is the copy you gave Prestige Realty. Notice anything different? He didn't look at it. He didn't need to. He knew. Even if there was some misunderstanding, he said slowly. I was trying to help you. You can't live here alone forever. You're 81. You forget things. You leave the stove on. I turned the stove off after you left the burner running last week. His mouth opened, then closed. And I remember every birthday in this family, every anniversary, every debt you've asked me to help you pay off over the past 20 years. I stood up, feeling the ache in my knees, but ignoring it. I am not confused. I am not incapable. And I am not moving. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he set the bags down on the counter with exaggerated calm. Fine, he said. You want to stay in this house until it falls apart around you. Be my guest. But don't come crying to me when you can't handle it anymore. He left that night, packed his bags, got in his car, and drove off without another word. I watched his taillights disappear down the street. I thought I would feel relieved. Instead, I felt hollow. This was my son, the baby I rocked at 3 o'clock in the morning. The boy who used to bring me dandelions from the backyard like they were roses. The man who stood beside me at Harold's funeral and promised he'd always take care of me. Somewhere along the way, that promise had rotted into something else. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, and she came highly recommended by one of my former colleagues. She had silver hair cut short, glasses that made her look perpetually skeptical, and a handshake that meant business. We met at her office downtown. I brought every document I had. She spread them across her desk and studied them with the focus of a surgeon examining x-rays. "Your son forged a legal document," she said finally. "That's a felony." "I know. He attempted to sell your property without authorization." "That's fraud." "I know that, too." She looked up at me. "What do you want to do about it?" I took a breath. This was the question I'd been asking myself for days. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? My son in handcuffs? No. What I wanted was simpler and harder than any of those things. "I want to protect myself," I said. "I want my house secure. I want him legally barred from any authority over my affairs. And I want there to be consequences. Real consequences, not just a family argument he can dismiss." Patricia nodded slowly. "We can do that. I'll file for a protective order and pursue criminal charges through the DA's office. Forgery and attempted fraud at minimum. If there's a pattern of financial manipulation, potentially elder abuse." "Elder abuse?" The words hung in the air like smoke. "He's my son," I said quietly. "I know," she replied gently. "That's what makes it harder. And that's why it has to stop." The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and phone calls and meetings. Patricia moved quickly. She filed the criminal complaint. She contacted the DA. She had me undergo a cognitive evaluation just to establish on record that I was fully competent. I passed with flying colors. The doctor said my memory was sharper than most people half my age. I told him I'd spent 40 years memorizing student names and test dates. He laughed and signed the paperwork. Meanwhile, Marcus called. First angry, then pleading, then angry again. He accused me of ruining his life. He said I was being manipulated by Rebecca. He said I'd always favored her. He said I was vindictive, senile, paranoid. I let the calls go to voicemail. Every single one. Then I saved them. Patricia said they might be useful. The court date was set for late October. I remember the day clearly. The sky was gray, the kind of flat autumn gray that makes everything feel muted. Rebecca drove me to the courthouse. She held my hand as we walked up the steps. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm ready." The hearing was in a small courtroom on the second floor. Marcus was already there with his lawyer, a nervously looking young man who kept adjusting his tie. Marcus didn't look at me when I entered. He stared straight ahead like I was a stranger. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She reviewed the case file in silence for several minutes before speaking. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "you are accused of forgery, fraud, and attempted theft of property. How do you plead?" Marcus's lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. My client was acting in what he believed to be his mother's best interest. There was a misunderstanding about the scope of the power of attorney." "A misunderstanding," the judge interrupted. "That involved whiting out an expiration date and submitting the altered document to a licensed realtor?" The lawyer faltered. We contend that Mrs. Coleman had previously expressed a desire to sell the property, and my client was simply, I never expressed any such desire," I said. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Coleman, you'll have your opportunity to speak." "I apologize, Your Honor, but I want to be clear. I never discussed selling my home with my son. I never authorized him to contact a realtor. And I never signed any document giving him authority over my property after 2017. The judge nodded. "Let the record show that the respondent has a notarized cognitive evaluation confirming full mental capacity and documentary evidence that the power of attorney in question expired over 6 years before these events." She turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Coleman, do you have anything to say?" For a moment, he was silent. Then he looked at me for the first time since I'd entered the room. His eyes were hard, but underneath the hardness, I saw something else. Fear. The fear of a man who had gambled on his mother's silence and lost. I was trying to help her, he said. She can't live alone in that house. She's 81 years old. What I need, I interrupted, is to be treated like a human being. Not a problem to be managed. Not an obstacle to be removed. I looked directly at him. I raised you, Marcus. I taught you right from wrong. I bailed you out of debt 3 times. And this is how you repay me? By trying to steal my home while I sleep. The courtroom went silent. The judge spoke. Mr. Coleman, based on the evidence presented, I am finding probable cause for forgery in the 1st degree and attempted fraud. This case will be bound over for trial. Bail is set at $20,000. Marcus's face went white. Additionally, the judge continued, a protective order is hereby issued. Mr. Coleman is prohibited from contacting Mrs. Coleman, accessing her financial accounts, or coming within 500 feet of her property. She looked at me. Mrs. Coleman, is there anything else you'd like to say? I stood slowly. My knees ached. My back was stiff, but I stood straight. I spent my whole life taking care of other people, I said. My students, my husband, my children. I never asked for much. Just respect. Just to be seen as a person, not a burden. I paused. My son forgot that somewhere along the way. I hope someday he remembers. But until then, I have to protect myself. Because nobody else will. The judge nodded. Court is adjourned. The trial came 3 months later. Marcus pleaded no contest to reduced charges, forgery in the 2nd degree and attempted fraud. His lawyer argued for leniency, citing no prior criminal record and family circumstances. The DA pushed for accountability. In the end, the judge sentenced him to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory restitution, $25,000 for my legal fees and emotional damages. It wasn't prison. Part of me had wanted that in my darkest moments. But watching my son stand there in a courtroom, hearing a judge read out his crimes, seeing the reality of what he'd done reflected back at him by the legal system, that was its own kind of punishment. After the sentencing, Marcus's lawyer approached me in the hallway. Mrs. Coleman, he said awkwardly, my client wanted me to tell you that he's sorry. I looked at him. If he were sorry, he would tell me himself. I walked away. That evening, Rebecca made dinner at my house. Pot roast, Harold's favorite recipe. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd graded papers for 4 decades. Where I'd helped my children with homework. Where I'd sat with my husband talking about nothing and everything. How do you feel? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought. Tired, I said finally. But not broken. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. I'm proud of me, too. 3 months after the trial, I made some changes. I updated my will. Rebecca was named executor. My granddaughter Emily, who was finishing nursing school, received a trust for her education and future. Marcus was removed from everything. I also installed a security system. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd learned that trust has to be earned, and locks aren't just for strangers. One afternoon, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. No note. No explanation. Just Marcus's handwriting on the memo line. First payment. I looked at that check for a long time. Then I endorsed it and deposited it into Emily's education fund. Let it do some good. Spring came slowly that year. The maple tree in the front yard budded late. But when the leaves finally unfurled, they were the brightest green I'd seen in years. I sat on my porch one morning with my coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up. Children waiting for the school bus. A woman walking her dog. The mailman making his rounds. Normal life. Ordinary life. The kind of life I almost lost. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Grandma, can I come visit this weekend? I want to hear your stories. I smiled and typed back, always. That Sunday, she sat with me in the living room while I showed her old photo albums. There was Harold on our wedding day. Young and nervous and so handsome it still made my heart ache. There were Marcus and Rebecca as children. Gap-toothed and grinning. There was the house, brand new, with a sold sign in the front yard. You've lived a whole life in this house, Emily said softly. I have. Do you ever think about leaving? Moving somewhere smaller? I looked around the room. At the curtains Harold and I picked out together. At the spot on the carpet where Rebecca took her first steps. At the kitchen doorway where I stood that night and heard my son betray me. Sometimes, I said. But not because I can't handle it. Because maybe someday I'll be ready for something new. I looked at her. The difference is, it'll be my choice. Not someone else's. She nodded. She understood. Before she left, she hugged me tight. Thank you, Grandma. For fighting. For not letting him win. Thank you for believing I could. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter. Not to Marcus. Not to anyone in particular. Just words I needed to put down. To whoever reads this, I wrote. If someone tells you that you're too old to make your own decisions, don't believe them. If someone tries to manage your life without your permission, stop them. If someone you love betrays you, you're allowed to grieve and fight at the same time. Age doesn't make you invisible. Silence doesn't make you safe. And the people who underestimate you are often the ones who need you to stay quiet so they can take what's yours. Don't stay quiet. I am 81 years old. I taught high school English for 38 years. I raised 2 children. I buried my husband. I almost lost my home to my own son. And I'm still here. Still standing. Still fighting. Still me. If my story means anything, let it mean this. You are never too old to say no. You are never too tired to protect yourself. And you are never, ever obligated to let love become an excuse for theft. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer with Harold's watch and our wedding photo. Someday someone would find it, and maybe, just maybe, it would remind them that their voice still matters. Outside, the wind rustled through the maple tree. The house creaked and settled the way old houses do. And I sat in the quiet. Not empty quiet, but peaceful quiet. The kind you earn when you stop letting other people write your story. My story. My house. My life. Nobody else's. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment.